Well, everybody, 24th of November, Daniel Farke remains in the job. Leeds United still employ the German. The San Francisco 49ers, or at least elements of the San Francisco 49ers, when you're looking at Parag Marat, seem to be focused a little bit more on Rangers this morning. Yes, Stewart up there and Kevin Thelwell have been relieved of their duties. We've obviously seen Russell Martin being relieved of his duties in around 3 to 4 weeks ago. And Leeds United, nothing. Tumbleweed. Yeah, it's just I'm perplexed at this moment in time, and that smoking gun is being pointed at the 49ers right now. The iteration of what we knew in the summer of a certain Daily Mail journalist being flying out with the 49ers to the likes of Ireland and America and getting exclusive pieces and being told 22 hours, I think it was, after promotion, well, after the bus day, that Daniel Farke, Leeds were looking to relieve him from his duties. They didn't do so. Leeds United then pursued to inform, or the board decided to inform in a follow-up piece to a certain said journalist that they were targeting 3 specific managers of which they were going to build the team around. That didn't happen. Leeds United went into the recruitment window backing Daniel Farke. Parag even spoke about it. Clearly, they weren't convinced, though, and we all know that now. It was pretty evident from the 49ers. And then Leeds went into the season of which Daniel Farke has done relatively okay. You look at it and you think to yourself, okay, he's got, 11 points in 12 games, albeit we have played a lot of the bottom basement sides now. Farke was mentioning in his press conference that, we do have, we need 6 wins and a couple of draws. That would probably take us to 33 to 35 points. That's not going to be enough, Daniel, to keep us in the Premier League. We need more than that. We need to start taking scalps from some of the big teams now to recover some of the losses or drop points we've had. How likely is that when you're in the bottom 3 with predictable in-game management, predictable starting 11s, predictable press conferences at this moment in time, of which I'm struggling to listen to? And then you've got sort of an ownership model who for 2 consecutive Mondays now should have made big decisions, and they haven't done it. Monday, the 10th of November, should have been where Daniel Farke was relieved of his duties after that Nottingham Forest game. That gives someone else a time in the international break. We spoke about Emery yesterday in massive detail. There was a period between September and October, late October, where they made that change. It might have even been mid-November. They made that change. They were on a downward spiral from Gerrard. They then made a big change, of which the stats back. If you make the changes early, you get a serious level of increased points to what you had if you were to make them later. I think the percentage-wise is around about a 30% decrease to making it 2 or 3 months later in the Premier League. So data-led people, you'd expect them to know this and make the change, especially with them in the summer saying that they do want to change when it comes to Daniel Farke, but clearly a bit of a board split and a fan reaction decision made there, which is slightly worrying because that's how the previous ownership kind of worked when it came to the fan reactions, of which I know all too well. So we kind of look at it right now and you think to yourself, well, what are they doing? There's loads going on at Rangers, there's sackings going on there, and we're kind of just waiting. I don't know what we're waiting for, but that was the perfect time, in my opinion, in the international break to make changes. You can get an ethos, a philosophy, videos sent to certain players, a real lift when it comes to the fan base, that we might see something different. We might see an unpredictable lineup. We might see differences in shape. People are talking about Gabby Goodmanson getting caught out on his left-hand side, which is what Farke mentioned in his press conference. How about tactical move around? How about helping Gabby Goodmanson and maybe putting a back 3 in place, of which there's then covering for Gabby Goodmanson on that left-hand side? No, we will stick to a very predictable 4-3-3, which sometimes moves into a 4-2-3-1, but effectively they're the same system. We don't do anything grand to move Leeds United around to be able to get points. Now, the positive, I hear you cry, some of the commenters. The positive for me is Bournemouth, Everton, Newcastle, Spurs, West Ham, yesterday against Aston Villa. There are positives with this Leeds United side. There is a level of competition of which I think a lot of this team can make when it comes to the Premier League. I think we've recruited in a way which prioritizes seniority and experience to a level, but also athleticism and physicality. The downfall with a lot of this in a lot of games is Farke's in-game management when it comes to substitutions, when it comes to maybe forcing Leeds to go back into a bit of a mid-block and defend, a low block and defend, of which Leeds can't do. We've spent a lot of money on the defense, of which Farke was a key component of as well, not just the 49ers. The defense is now leaking a mass amount of goals. You're looking at a 2 goal per game average now, which when we can talk about the attack, but the defense has been, really sort of invested in, really, when you look at it. And there's some good profiles back there because you look at that midfield is also part of the defensive structure. And there's good profiles back there. There is obviously depth on that bench of which we've not utilized as well enough this season. But when, there's conversations after the game and Unai Emery's talking about the 2v2s at the back and he's talking about the overloads and wasn't talking about the specific individuals, which do make a difference in football, of course, but he was talking more about systems and how Leeds United were very intense in the first half, but he felt if he overloaded in certain areas and he looked at Leeds' 2v2 system and Villa were able to overload there and really overwhelm Leeds on the counter-attack, and they would have those moments. That's what he changed. And he changed that early in the second half. And obviously on the 45th minute, Farke doesn't do that. We did a countdown till the 70th minute. We did a countdown. It's almost like he's not actually going to. And he made that change on the 70th minute. Then he made another sort of wrap of changes on the 80th minute. You can't do that. It's not Premier League management. It's not Premier League management. But the positive for me is I feel like we've got players in that side right now, in my opinion, who can compete. And we've shown that we can compete. I think you've got to say with Daniel Farke in the Championship, he did a good job. Okay? Did a good job in the Championship. Got Leeds United up, of course. But the test for Farke was going to be in the Premier League. Can he do what he didn't do at Norwich? And obviously, I've had conversations with people this morning saying, Connor, the team's not good enough. And I get that. That's always going to be the conversation. But I think the evidence has been there this season that when Leeds have been intense, when Leeds United have been pressing, when there's a bit of coordination there, Leeds have been good. Leeds have competed. And that's what I'm taking away from that. I think a lot of it has been undone by Farke's in-game management, of which we saw yesterday. It was there for us yesterday. The in-game management in the second half showed why Unai Emery and Daniel Farke are levels apart. Levels apart. As much as you like Daniel Farke, as much as the emotion is there with him getting us up from the Championship to the Premier League, and as much as people might absolutely adore him, which I know there's a few of you out there, and I understand that, you have got to look at the fact his in-game management is poor. It's very poor. You get Unai Emery coming out after the game talking about the tactical switches, why he made the changes, what certain area of the game they were losing X, Y, and Z in, taking accountability for the first half, believe it or not, accountability. Farke's coming out afterwards with a passionate defense of Brendan Aronson. And look, I feel sorry for Brendan. I really do feel sorry for Brendan now because there's a guy who's actually keeping him in the side. But also you go a little bit higher and there's a bunch of guys at the top who this morning on the 24th of November are focusing more on Rangers, or people who are involved with the 49ers Enterprises are focusing more on Rangers than they are with Leeds United in the bottom three of the Premier League. It's mental. And the apathy that we're all feeling now is because we're used to it. We're kind of used to this ownership. We've been used to it for 3 decades. But the ownership, where they're just not decisive enough, they either don't have enough cash or they're not decisive enough or they make the wrong decisions in general. But my positive look at it right now is I think Leeds have got enough. I think we've got enough to finish 17th. I've always said that to you guys. Some help in January would not go amiss. Of course it wouldn't. And if a new man comes in and he wants a certain profile of player, brilliant. But we've got a certain profile of player and the manager's moved away from that. But you saw yesterday when we played to our strengths, when we were a little bit more direct, when we were more aggressive, when we were more intense, that is what Leeds United need to play like every week. And we've shown that we can do that. If we were porous and we were drab and we weren't good enough and we were still passing out from the back in phases, and, we were getting picked off consistently, like we have seen the last 2 weeks, but like Southampton and Ipswich were doing last season, week in, week out. Or not last season, sorry, but, was it last season? It might be. Yeah, it was last season, wasn't it? Week in, week out. And it was porous and the players were not good enough. Fair enough. But you can actually see that these players are good enough, in my opinion. They are good enough. We do have good enough players to stay in the Premier League with maybe a little sprinkle of glitter in January. But the 49ers, 110% need to make this decision right now. Right now. They haven't done it. This is what's so frustrating for me right now. And this was supposed to be an ups and downs video, but it's not an ups and downs video. This is just a downs video. But the ups is obviously the fact that I think this squad can compete. I think it can compete. You look even at our bench yesterday, and for large portions of the game, we were competing with sub players on the pitch. But you make those changes earlier, and Leeds are probably able to do stuff. Different framework, different ideas. Can we switch it up a little bit? There's ways to protect Gabby Goodmanson. Talking about in the post-match game about Brendan Aronson being so important for Jayden Bogle. He's just trying to justify his decision. But then we're all saying that he needs a number 10, or people were saying that he needs a number 10, but he's had Nonto and Dan James available for the best part of a month, and he doesn't play them. He keeps with Brendan Aronson, who was nowhere near the strongest winger when it came to the Championship. And people were still saying, oh, well, in the Championship, he's only got Brendan Aronson, but he continues to play with Brendan Aronson when he's got better options off the bench. I'd rather have Altanaka in the number 10 than Brendan Aronson, you know? I think he veered over to the 10 for a little bit in the last game, and obviously it wasn't working against Villa, so he moved back out. But, you know, talking about Brendan's mental health and all this sort of stuff, we'll take him out then. Take him out for the better options that we have anyway. That's going to help him, you know? And I just, yeah, the comment of it is just, you know, and I understand he backs Aronson, but there's certain players he just doesn't back. He just doesn't back. And we all know there's favouritism in football, but it's definitely there with Farke. But the favouritism isn't helping him. You know, Jaden Bogle, Brownie was mentioning it the other day and last night, sorry, and someone said it to me as well, who was down at the game. My old man was at the game yesterday. He said Bogle avoids passing the ball to him, and he does. Just watch Jaden Bogle. So when he's talking about, you know, Aronson doing a lot when it comes to help, we've done an analytical breakdown of the comparison between Aronson and Nonto when it comes to the defensive side of it. Nonto's on the same level as him. Look at the ball recoveries off Brendan Aronson against Nottingham Forest. It was stark in that second half. Yesterday in the second half, Villa were counter-attacking in those 2v2 situations because Brendan Aronson was keeping hold of the ball too long. Brendan Aronson went off the pitch because he thought he was being substituted. Then he remained on the pitch. But this isn't just as a pointer at Brendan Aronson, but it's the stubbornness that Daniel Farke has to these players. And it's the lack of pragmatism and lack of ideas he has. We know what he's going to do. If I know what he's going to do, Unai Emery, being the master tactician he is, he's going to know what Daniel Farke is going to do. And he did. And he schooled him. Okay. So the positive for me is you've seen Leeds compete this season. I think with a lack of real tactical framework and strategy, but I've seen Leeds compete on a technical level. Duels, certain areas, phases, little pockets with good touches, good decision making. I've seen Leeds compete this season. You know, Metra's now on 3-3 goal wise. That's at least a positive we can take from this. Yeah, I thought, you know, I know, Amanda Farke mentioned this, and maybe we could adapt a little bit here. Who knows? But seeing him mention Goodmanson, but I think overall he's been a net positive for Leeds this season. Beale, we've not seen enough of him. Not seen enough of him. Thrived in a back three in the international break. We don't see any of it. We've recruited for a back three. Jaden Bogle, I think, has been a real positive. The goalkeeper, there's questions there, but I think there's also added blame to put to Joe Rodon for not jumping for that free kick. And I will say, I've watched that goal back, and it's a brilliant free kick by Morgan Rogers. I was able to dip that over the wall. But could we have done much better in the leading up to the goal, and then even just in the wall, and maybe Perry? I think so. I think Okafor has been a relative success. I think before this game and before this period, he's been getting better and better and better. You know, now we've at least got Metra who's competing when it comes to goals. That's what people want. I think there's positives within this squad, especially if they splatter a couple of additions in January. But the manager isn't getting enough out of it. And therefore, the board are a massive problem because they are sleepwalking again. I'm really worried that they're going to do this thing where is it going to be Marsh? They've been part of the board structure for the past 4 or 5 years, blamed everything on, effectively, we all know this, read between the lines, they're blaming everything on Brad. Oh, we're going to be different to Radrizzani, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They've done that. And then we're kind of going into a period right now where if Daniel Farke, even though they wanted him gone, let's be honest, in the summer, if Daniel Farke, I feel, if he got a win against Liverpool or Chelsea, they'd keep him in the job. They'd keep him in the job, and they wouldn't look at that long-termness with Leeds. So I'm actually looking at it and I'm thinking that would sort of lead us into the January window. And then if performances didn't improve, they might bring a couple in and then potentially sack him in February. That's Marsh. It's what Rads and Orta did and Kinnear with Marsh. And Marsh is at a better points per game ratio in the Premier League than what Farke was at or is at. So do you see what I mean? It's kind of similar patterns happening again. And the lack of ruthlessness, the stat that's been bandied around, which we've done on the channel, where if you sack managers within a September to end of November period, your statistically, your results will probably be in and around, I think it was 71% better than what it would be in January or February, which is down to 40%, probably because you've got less time. And they've been in the boardroom in the Premier League when it's just gone chaotic. But it feels like now their focus is at Rangers at the minute when it comes to key personnel at Leeds United. It's mental. And that's why, look, we can look at Daniel Farke, but there's people keeping him in the job. And I'm not saying there hasn't been a couple of mistakes in recruitment. Definitely. This isn't taken away from that, by the way. But I do think when we're talking about a manager, and there's people who are talking about, you know, the level of coach that is out there and the profiles that we brought in to stay up in the Premier League. Let's not forget, 2 years ago, there was mass criticism on Southampton, on Ipswich, on Leicester, because they didn't recruit in a way which prioritised seniority, physicality, athleticism. Leeds then did that, and then we've moved away from that style of football, and the in-game management is killing us. Killing us. But when we actually play that way, when we're a little bit more direct, aggressive, intense, Leeds are all right. We're good. We are good. Villa fan message. I mentioned to you guys yesterday. I've got cousins who are Villa fans. I've got a lot of family in Sutton Coldfield. Messaging me yesterday, going, Connor, your boys are decent here. First half, you're very decent. You're out, but you probably should be more than one. Second half, he messages me. Farker's done this for you, and I was like, yeah, I know. But then they should have done it when it comes to the international break, the 10th of November. I mentioned after the Forest game if they were serious. They've now waited again, but you've got to do it now. And they're not doing it now. They're not doing it. So we're sleepwalking. So what's the reality here? They won't sack. I don't think they'll sack him after City because in the boardroom they'll go, probably, well, we're expected to lose to City. That almost white flag loser-ish mentality, which, yeah, don't get me wrong. The squad value between teams, I completely understand that. But that's probably where they're looking at it. And they'll say that's about a realism. Maybe it is. But then maybe you lose to Chelsea, you lose to Liverpool. On the other side of things, you bring a new manager who installs philosophy, ethos, a real idea, systems, difference in lineup. We'd have beaten Villa yesterday. 100%. And then maybe you go into City, make it a little bit more difficult for them, a little bit more unpredictable, a little bit more framework, specificity when it comes to roles, triggers, spacing. Once again, we saw again in the second half yesterday how isolated the front man was, but we can't sit in a low to mid box. We can't do it. The goals against now are reflecting that. And we've had a very decent run. And now we go into a very hard run, the most difficult run in the Premier League, if you're to believe Opta's next 6-game run. And we just stick with the manager, and that's it. It's championship ownership. So we can talk about championship manager in terms of Daniel Farke, but you got to look at the ownership, keeping him in. Passive, indecisive, weak. It's just such a shame that this has been it. I just can't believe this has been it. This has been the Premier League campaign. This is it, and we're kind of getting to a stage as a fan base now where we're like, well, the writing's on the wall, isn't it? And we're on the 24th of November. So, yeah, guys, as I said, Farke, I think in pre-season, I think last season as well, he's done decent. Farke's done a decent job in terms of getting us promoted. The pre-season, we're seeing a few bits, but there's stuff to build on with this squad, in my opinion. And there's strengths in this squad, which we've seen this season. There's evidence of it. But the management of the game, I think, is skew-whiffing people's opinions. That's what I think. Because yesterday, Villa weren't at the best. I thought we should have beaten Bournemouth. Should have got something against Spurs. But we're moving away. The same things are happening. Top elite managers are able to figure this out straight away. We wait, and then we go for the Hail Marys. It's not good enough at Premier League standard. It's not respectful enough to the Premier League and how good it is and how vicious it is and the enormity of the task in terms of adapting you to be intertwined with it. Guys, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. We'll bring you breaking news if it happens. Doubt it will. Let us know what your thoughts are. Cheers.